Thanks, Martin. You can see the title that's up there, and it's a bit of a coincidence, I suppose, that either last night or this morning, somebody released some information around questions children ask. Between the ages of 3 to 11, this will not surprise you, I suspect, those of you who are parents, children will ask you in the region of 10,000 questions. 20,000 in Emma's case now, and on a daily basis that equates to about 27 questions. 3 most popular ones you can probably guess, can you? Where the babies come from. Why do you get staying up late and I don't? And why is it that I have to do what you tell me? There are lots of other difficult questions. And I wanted to just take a second or two to talk about questions before we come to the passage we're going to look at this morning. Because as once asked your series around questions Jesus asked, and it's absolutely fascinating looking at questions Jesus asked. And then you stop and ask yourself a question, why was Jesus asking questions? Didn't he know the answers to the questions? I always believe, by the way, and I wish governments would do this, never ask a question, Martin, that you don't know the answer to. Or if you don't know the answer, be prepared to deal with whatever answer you get. I wish we had done that a few years ago. Jesus clearly didn't need to ask questions. Teachers in the same boat. Clever teachers, of course, ask the right questions that demand youngsters think about what they're about to say. There's a lovely famous example. I need to take a minute to tell you this one. A wee girl was half asleep in the class, and the teacher was clearly a bit disconcerted, so whipped round and turned to her and said, Jeannie, what's 2,345 plus 3,457? To which Jeannie looked up and says, I don't think I know. To which the teacher, drawing herself up to her 4'10" height, said, I don't, and of course, Jeannie then said, what do you think it is? To which the teacher says, I don't think I know. To which Jeannie said, I don't think I know either. So always be very careful when you ask questions. But questions are there for a purpose. It's to get information out. And most of the time, it is actually to learn more about the person that's being asked the question than the person who's asking the question, as you'll find out in this little passage. But I wanted to just say one other little thing around this little section we're coming to in John's Gospel, because this was a sign, what happened this day that we come to. And it's interesting that the other gospel writers, they use a particular word when they talk about the signs that Jesus did. And it's a word that you're really familiar with. In the English language, it's dynamite. In the old Greek, it was dynamis. It really was dynamite. It was the power that was behind it. So when the other gospel writers talk about what Jesus did and the things he did, they're talking about dynamic. It's dynamite. It's powerful. John doesn't use that word at all. He talks about signs. And what he was saying was when Jesus was doing this is a sign to you. You need to understand what this is about. And interestingly enough, and it's relevant for what we're about to talk about, Jesus didn't use these words. He used another word. A word that we actually, again, get in our English language and ergonomics and so on. It's erga. It's work. And Jesus said, this is my work. This is what I do, and do it for a purpose. Jesus was hoping, and John was hoping, that Jesus didn't need to use signs. They were, in Jesus' mind, the last resort. They should have seen clearly what was happening. If you go to the next chapter, what you'll discover this, that Jesus says, there, I did the miracle, I did the work. John says he did the sign, and you totally missed it. You didn't get it. It was about the feeding of the thousands with the bread. It's all you were caring about was getting your stomach filled. You totally missed what was happening. In John chapter 10, John says this, listen, if you don't get it, at least understand who I am through what I do. Would you get it? They're very important. And says John, when he comes to the end of this book that recounts all of these things, this is what he says about what he's written. I'm telling you all of this so that you might believe. And this morning, as we come to look at this one, I would really love that every single one of us got it. We understood what was happening here, and we believed. So come with me to this particular occasion. Let's see if I can guess who are. In chapter 5 of John, this is what John says. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Let me just stop for half a second. It doesn't matter which festival. Don't get hung up on which festival. It doesn't matter. But get hung up in this. This isn't a fairy story. This isn't fiction. This is an act of history. This is something that actually happened sometime later. And says John, it was Jerusalem it was taking place, and it was at one of the festivals. This is a point in time. Now, says John, there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, I'll show you in a minute, a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Now, if I can be clever with this, which I probably can't, if I do that, and that's a photograph of a model of what it is, and here it is. It's beside St. Stephen's Gate up there that goes into the city, into the temple, and here are 2 pools. And you remember it said 5 colonnades, and people, well, this had vanished, over the years, and people come to read this and say, this is a load of mince, by the way, this is a fairy tale. This just didn't happen. The place doesn't exist. They found the pool of Siloam, but could they find the pool of Bethesda? No. They hunted high and low. And for thousands of years, 1,800 years, they couldn't trace it. And then the archaeologists did trace it, and they found it. So they know exactly where it is. In fact, the very first slide that I showed you had a picture of it in its current day state. But they still weren't absolutely sure about it. Was this the pool of Bethesda, or was it not? Or was it just another pool? What was it? And again, they poo-pooed it. It's not really. It didn't happen. And then, of course, actually, what they do is they do find it. And there are indeed the pools. And they found a stone, not as long ago as 1800, but just a few decades ago. And on the stone was written in Aramaic the word Bethesda. Bethesda. Do you know what Bethesda means? It can mean one of 2 things from the old language. It's the house of mercy or the house of grace. But it also can mean the house of shame and the house of disgrace. No, it's strange. What a strange title to have for a place. But it did exist. That photograph, just by a coincidence, I'd never been to the Holy Land. I have it, God willing, in my diary for next September. I hope finally to get there. But I've been to Florida, as some of you probably have, to the Holy Land experience there. And there's a superb model of Jerusalem. And I was just going through my pictures when, what popped up? There it is. In the model, there was a picture of the pool of Bethesda. So I need you to kind of know that this is not just a bit of history, it's a bit of geography. It took place. It actually took place. And let's stop for a second about that house of mercy or house of shame. Let me see if I can now come back. And here's what John says. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie. The blind, the lame, the paralyzed. That's why it was the house of shame. It was folks that couldn't help themselves. They were wrecks of humanity, came to this pool every day. Now you'll notice I've put up a wee bit in smaller print, so your eyesight probably won't get it. And it might be in your Bible, and it might not. And the reason is because in the original manuscript, it wasn't there. But when scribes came to rewrite the text each time, they came to this bit, and they very helpfully inserted a little sentence, not to add anything to the text, but to explain the text. Because if you're like me, you're saying to yourself, why are all these people, particularly these people, coming to these two pools? Well, says the scribe, here was the reason. They waited for the moving of the waters. From time to time, an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. The first one into the pool after each such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease they had. Don't know if that was true or not. Don't know whether it worked or not. But it must have, or you wouldn't have had people gathering like that and spending so long beside the waters hoping for it. There are people who do that today to various places across the earth that they consider sacred. Lourdes is a clear case in point. So says the writer, that's the reason they were all there. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. Can you get that for a wee minute? Seriously, can you get that? 38 years. For those of us who are getting a wee bit older, time passes extremely quickly, I have to say. But 38 years in anybody's language is an awful long time. Day in, day out, this fellow found himself at these waters. Day in, day out. Never cured, never helped, every single day in life, waiting on other people to help him. He was a complete wreck in anybody's language, mentally and physically now. And there he is, and into this scene, Jesus comes. And when Jesus saw him lying there, and learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, do you want to get well? To a Scottish audience, sorry for those who have come up from down south and maybe whose roots aren't up here, how stupid can you get would be a standard Scottish phrase. Are you serious? Do you want to get well? 38 years lying in misery. Do you want to get well? What a stupid question to ask. And of course, the man said, what do you think? Of course I want to get well. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down before me. That's not what Jesus asked. He didn't ask, how did you get to where you are? He didn't ask, are you hurting? He didn't ask, why is it you can never get in the pool? He asked, do you actually want to get better? He wanted more than a yes or no, of course. A curious one, isn't it? Why would Jesus ask a question like that? It's a strange, strange one. Do you know, it's a hard thing to say. Every single one of us in this room, I suspect, are saying to themselves, in me, the answer's obvious. Of course I want to get well. I don't come here every day if I didn't want to get well. I want to get well. That's what I want to do. But actually, there are some circumstances in life when we don't want to get well. We're happy with our circumstances. To change them is going to change a whole lot about what we are and where we are and what's happening. I would never make the assumption on anybody's behalf to think about what people think about that, but it's true. And Jesus says to him, do you want to be well? He says, sir, you see my circumstances. I can't get into the water. And what this man wanted, if he did genuinely want to get well, was somebody to be there with him on the day when it happened and get him right down to the edge and into the water as fast as he possibly could, and he might get cured. That's what he wanted. That's not what he needed. That's not what he needed. What he needed was exactly the person who's just come up beside him. What did he need more than anything else in life right now was Jesus Christ. He didn't need quicker reflexes, actually. He didn't need other helpers. He needed Jesus. And he was about to discover just how much. What does Jesus say to him? What's it been like for these years? It must have been awful waiting. Have you got no friends at all? How, by the way, did you get yourself into this position? Is this something that happened to you when you were a youngster? Was it an accident of birth? Was it? What is it? Why are you here? Never asked a single question. Doesn't say to him, I know you've had to come here every day, but I hope you've been trying to get to the temple as well. Doesn't ask us anything about him at all. He simply says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And what happens? It says one translation, and with that, the invalid was healed. One word from Jesus. He stands up, he picks up the mat, and he goes. Just like that. I want to reflect on that a wee bit later on as time permits. Doesn't ask anything about him. Just does it. At once the man was cured, he picked up his mat, and he walked. And then John says a strange thing. Sorry, let me come back. The day in which this took place was a Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, it's a Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. But he replied, standard Scottish answer, it wasn't me. See that? See what he says? The man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. There's something funny going on in this story, isn't there? Isn't there something missing in the bit before that bit about the Sabbath? Isn't there a wee bit floating around there that should be saying, wow, how did you do that? That's miraculous. Oh, 38 years I've been waiting for people to take me down there, and in a blinding second, you've cured me. How did you do that? Why me? Look at the hundreds of others round about you. Why did you pick me? John never mentions any of that. He didn't even stop to say, wow, who are you? What's your name? Can I tell people about you? He heads off on the Sabbath and the Jews get him. So they asked him, who is this fellow you told you to pick up and walk? Look at it. The man who was healed had no idea who it was. For Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, now watch this. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, see, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. I don't know his motivation in that, and I wouldn't even like to judge it. I hope what was behind it, but I don't think it was that he was so overwhelmed at what had happened that he wanted to share with as many people as possible what had happened to him and let them know that this man, Jesus, is incredible. I think it was more, I suspect, to get them off his back. And just say, I know who it is now, by the way. I'm reporting back to you. He was probably more frightened of the Jewish leaders than he was of the person who could command his body to be healed. And so, watch what happens, says John. Because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." Remember what we said about work, about signs, about power? This was Jesus' work. We were going through an experience, as some of you have done, of reading the Bible through another book, and everybody reads it. It's like a book, not like the way the Bible's usually laid out. And we started in Genesis this time around instead of the New Testament. And one of the fascinating things, of course, was that creation story about God resting after it was all over. And he rested because the work was done. And more or less, not long after that, God has never stopped working, and neither has his Son. Because what was spoiled away back then is still spoiled and needs sorted. And God won't rest until it's been sorted. Or in the words of this story, until they've been healed. I want to say 4 things to you just as we finish. Where's the clock? I'm okay still. Is it a hot lunch you're getting? Because we'll see. I want to say 4 things just simply to you about this story. True story. Jesus knows you better than you know yourself. It's the psalmist David who really gets to the heart of that. Listen to what he says in kind of the older language. "You discern my thoughts from afar. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, you know it altogether." Did Jesus need to ask the question of the man? Absolutely not. But he did it. Because he knew exactly what the man needed. The man thought what he needed was a healed body. But if truth were told, that's not what he needed, but that's what he got. But he needed more than that. He needed a healed soul. And Jesus knows everything about you. And he knows whether you or I think we are whole or not. And there are times when I think I'm actually okay. And then there are times when I actually frankly realize I'm not okay. I need a degree of support and comfort and help and challenge sometimes. And forgiveness. And God speaks to every single one of us in this audience today, in the year in which we live, just as he spoke so clearly way back then, inside each one of us. Do you really need me? Or do you not? He says at another point, the people that are well don't need a doctor. Don't need a doctor. But the truth of the matter is, every single one of us needs God in our lives. Jesus knows you better than you know yourself. But here's the important bit. Jesus loves you more than you can ever imagine. I really don't care this morning what your background is. There's a bit of me does care, of course. I wouldn't like to think you were in trouble this morning. But I don't care what your background is. I don't care if you're black or white or what colour you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care where you worship or not. I don't care if you're an agnostic or an atheist. I don't care if you couldn't care less about the stuff we're talking about this morning. None of that matters. Did you notice what Jesus did on 2 occasions in this story? He went to the place where people were needing it most, right to them. And he didn't ask any questions about, what do you think? Are you going to follow me or are you not? Are you going to commit to going to church every Sunday or not? Absolutely no issues laid down. Just simply, do you trust me enough to believe what I'm going to do for you? And he did. He was healed. And he goes away. He goes away. What happens? Jesus goes and finds him and says, listen, there's a bit more to this than just happened. You need to trust. You need to believe. You need to know you are loved. Jesus loves you more than you could ever imagine. Time and time again in John's Gospel, 9 times over, at least in John's Gospel, this is what John says. Jesus was moved with compassion. There was no other reason for Jesus to talk to this man. No other reason other loving him and wanting him to be better. The third thing I want to say to you is this. There's no one else can sort that out but Jesus. He's the only one that's got the power to do it. In this sign, in this miracle, in this example of Jesus' work, he just speaks and it's done. It's instantaneous. And time again, that's what happens when people meet Jesus. The man now knows he didn't need someone to help him into the water. He needed Jesus because he was the one person on this planet who could solve the problem forever. My time's gone, but there is a very important lesson. The reason Jesus can do that is because he's the only one who's capable of doing it. Because he is none other than God's Son, that he himself said. He's the one who actually sorted the wrongs out of yours and mine. He is the one who went to Calvary that you've heard about before and again, who died, historical, geographical act in history, died for us. He is the one who rose again for us. He is the one from whom only we can ever get forgiveness and love that matters. Why can we do what we did this morning around that lovely dedication for Phoebe? Because we know that life is not run on our own. We know there'll be not just 10,000 questions coming your way. You missed that one. 10,000 questions. There'll be 10,000 problems and 10,000 joys. And there's only one person can help you through all of that. And it's Jesus. There is a gift beyond the healing of the body. And it was a gift of the healing of the soul. There are big issues around this story, by the way, that I don't understand. Well, I do, actually, in a way. There were hundreds of people that day, and you must be sitting saying, Ken, why did he not deal with the rest? Why was there only one lucky person? And there's one simple answer, really. This was a sign. And the sign is a marker that has been put down. That this is a world where there is all sorts of disease and unhappiness and sadness. But there is someone who can cure that once and for all, forever, because this world doesn't stop when you and I pass away. There is a future that is prepared for every single person who's trusted in him. There's an old hymn, I'm not going to ask you to sing it, And it's really not appropriate for this morning, except in its words, as you'll see, but we'll change the word. The hymn goes like this: your touch has still its ancient power. No word from thee can fruitless fall. Here in this solemn morning hour, and in thy mercy, heal us all. Jesus would have wished every single person gathered round the pools that day would get healed. But he knew there was a bigger, more important matter to deal with. And it was you. And it was me. And he's dealt with it. Let's open this glorious, lovely Sunday morning as we celebrate again later on over lunch with Phoebe and Hannah. Let's celebrate as well that God loves you and loves me.